Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 minutes. Well, today's chapters are Proverbs 21 and 22. Now, I'm still in Melbourne. This city is known to be the most locked down city in the world, or that's what these pastors claim anyway. 252 days of lockdown. We're out of that now, and I'm really excited today. I'm moving to another suburb, joining pastors that used to be pastors at One Life, and so I'm delighted to be going there. But before we go, this scripture has been going through my mind as I've been reading the Proverbs. Colossians 3, let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs of the Spirit. In other words, let the message of Christ come through you as you encourage each other with the Psalms, with the Old Testament, with songs, and in numerous ways. Now, when we go on trips like this, one of the things we do as pastors is encourage each other, strengthen each other in the work of the ministry. And so, how do you take the gospel of Jesus and retrofit it into Proverbs? Well, let's have a look at the very first verse. In the Lord's hand, the king's heart is a stream of water, for he channels it towards all who he pleases. In other words, this verse is saying kings have authority and God channels their heart towards people. In other words, what's he saying? He's saying that God is sovereign and he controls kings. Verse 31 of the same chapter says, the horse is made ready for the day of battle, but victory rests with the Lord. And so kings may posture, armies may gather, laws may be instituted, but the victory is in the Lord. And where did that victory come from? The victory is born on the cross of Christ, where he defeated all our enemies. And so that's where our victory lies. In verse 3, it says, to do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. In other words, as we encourage each other in ministry and in our worship of the Lord, being right with God, having our heart in the right place with God is far better than religious ceremonies, than sacrifices, as it says here. Haughty eyes and a proud heart are the unplowed field of the wicked, producing sin. Isn't that very graphic? Haughtiness, pride, causes things to grow in you that shouldn't be there. Better to live in the corner of a roof than share the house with a quarrelsome wife, the writer of the Proverbs. You know, he had issues with women, and we know that Solomon did. So he said, better to live in a desert than with a quarrelsome and nagging wife. And I think the other applies too. Husbands can be just as quarrelsome and just as nagging, can't it? Whoever shuts their ears and that cries to the poor will also cry out and not be answered. The Bible speaks often about God backing the poor. The very next chapter, chapter 22, says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. And so this is an encouragement to have no debt, as the New Testament says, other than that of love outstanding. And because we don't want to be slave to anybody. We want to be a slave to Christ, don't we? The generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. God underwrites, he backs the poor and those who have means, as we look after those who aren't. God underwrites that. I love verse 13 of this next chapter. The sluggard says, there's a lion outside. I'll be killed in the public square. Isn't that a very interesting turn of phrase? That we make all sorts of excuses. There's lions there. There's issues there. There's just not to do it. Just not to have to work. Now, this brings to an end 12 long chapters of double phrase wisdom comments. So it's been quite a thing, hasn't it, to plow through all the wisdom in these chapters. We're now going to 30 sayings that are grouped in much bigger and more sequential and orderly fashion. So Firstly, it's the teaching to be honest, then not to exploit the poor because the Lord will pick up their case. Then don't get involved with hot-tempered people. It's going to cause you trouble, whether you marry them or go into business with them. Be careful of putting pledges down. You'll lose your bed, it says in verse 26. And then skill. If you develop a skill, it'll present you before kings. It'll make way for you. Well, as we go into this next series of 30 sayings, I trust that God will speak to you.